Hello, everyone. Rob Guest from football.london here, and welcome to the latest episode of Gold and Guest Talk Tottenham, sponsored by NordVPN. Joining me as ever, it's Alasdair Gold. Ali, you well?
Yeah, I am. Hope you are too. Just about, anyway. Do you know what? You having a day off yesterday, it made it so difficult. I can't believe that we're going to have to talk about some of the aspects of that Newcastle defeat all these days later. I've been desperately trying to put it out of my mind. And this is like kind of going into some therapy session where I've got to bring it all up again, all the painful memories, stir them up. I mean, thankfully, in terms of Tottenham Hotspur, there was something decent that happened this weekend as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, very much so. Tottenham Hotspur women will be playing in the FA Cup final at Wembley Stadium Sunday, May the 12th against Manchester United. Spurs were in action at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday. We're trailing 1-0 against Leicester City, but things turned around late on. Jess Naz restoring parity in the closing minutes, and then Martha Thomas scoring in the 118th minute. So really good to see Spurs back at Wembley.
It's remarkable. It really is such an incredible achievement by that group of women, Robert Villaham in charge, what they've done, because I think it's maybe just people get a bit blasé about, you talk about the FA Cup and Spurs, obviously not for 30 years or so, but have been an FA Cup team in the past, as in the men, and won it 8 times. And you can kind of overlook the fact of just how new the women's section is. It's just really, I mean, I think they were only started training at Hotspur Way full time about 3-4 years ago. They've only became professionals kind of roughly around that time as well. This is, Spurs were the first when they first won the World Cup. World Cup, that'd be great. When they first won the FA Cup, they were a non-league team, and are still, I think, the only non-league team to ever won it. Technically, this women's team were pretty much a non-league team, like just over half a decade ago or so. What they have done and what they have come from is just incredible. The rise, and to get through to an FA Cup final is just an amazing achievement from this group of players. And it kind of is. It's a massive nod to all of those who came before as well and got them to this stage. They originally started, I think it was 1985, as Broxbourne Ladies. They weren't even a Tottenham Hotspur team. They had to kind of fight a little bit to, I think it was Glenn Weaver, if I remember correctly, was the chairman who came on and helped and kind of managed to get Tottenham to allow them to actually use their name. Then that was only the start of the process, because they were still almost seen as there's a ladies team with Tottenham Hotspur in their name, and they weren't massively part of the club, although they were kind of had the name. And then just over the years, they slowly were included more and more and more, with a lot of work from those who kind of looked after the club. There's 5, I guess, founding members across when I think it was Glenn Weaver. I wrote a piece I did on it a while back, but he unfortunately passed away, and I think it was his sister and one of the parents, one of the players, took it on, and they eventually got to the phase where they were playing, and training at Hotspur Way, and and playing games. That first game I remember at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was just incredible, and I think at that point they were still. I'm trying to remember if it was their first WSL game there, or whether it was but in the season before when they got promoted. I can't remember now. I was there. I should know. But it's just remarkable. What an incredible rise to where they are now, to be in an FA Cup final. It's been a real season of change. Rhiannon Skinner heading off last season. Robert Villaham coming in with a very different style of football. You've seen that in the leagues. There's been some amazing performances. There's been some where you can see it's a team in transition. It sounds quite familiar. It sounds like the men's team as well. But this is just an incredible moment. And I wasn't able to get to the game. I did watch it all, but unfortunately I had a family thing later that day, so I couldn't actually get to the stadium. But I did watch the game in full on the telly, and they played so well. They were so dominant for long periods. They kind of got hit by a sucker punch of a terrific goal from distance about 12 minutes in. But they just pushed and they pushed, and the crowd was great. I think it's about 18,000 people there as well. Pushed them on. Jessica Naz was just a threat throughout the whole game. Her running, her dribbling, just charging through the centre of the pitch most of the time, and that paid off. She seized on a mistake, ran through, and lovely clinical finish in the bottom right corner. And then, extra time was scary. There was Leicester had a chance. I think it was a free kick that Becky Spencer pushed onto the underneath of the crossbar. Then I think it was Martha Thomas actually had a shot that was pushed just inches wide of the post. And then with 2 minutes to go, up pops Martha Thomas with a terrific looping header into the back of the net. And kind of history. I mean, it was already history. It was their first ever FA Cup semi-final. And now they're going to Wembley next month. I think it's May the 12th, unless I've got that wrong, against Man United. It's going to be brilliant. A brilliant occasion. Playing Man U this weekend, actually. It's a bit of a kind of a curtain raiser, as it were, to that game. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. And absolutely, I think, turned around as a club what had been a wretched weekend until that point. They really kind of put some smiles back on faces again. And credit to all of them because they've been magnificent.
Yep, we'll go from the positive to the negative now, and that is Tottenham losing at St James's Park for the second year on the trot. It wasn't 6-1 this time around, it was 4-0, but Newcastle could have got 6 on another day. They had the opportunities. Really was a wretched day for Ange Postecoglou and his team. Alexander Isak opening the scoring. Anthony Gordon getting one about a minute or so later. Isak again just after half-time, and then Fabian Schär with a good header. Not a good one from a Tottenham perspective to round off the scoring late on. I think a lot probably, went to St James's Park. Some might have been fearing the worst given what happened last season, but I think some have been a bit positive when you were looking at the injuries Newcastle have to deal with at present, but they still had a good team out. Bruno Guimaraes, Anthony Gordon, Alexander Isak, some really good players in there. And they put Tottenham to the sword, and really was, a truly wretched day for Spurs.
It was dreadful. Like you say, it kind of started with a little bit of promise. And, Timo Werner had a couple of chances and you thought, okay, this might be different. And I think I remember us sat in the press box and me saying, 21 minutes, we got there. Or it was one of us said it to the other. It was like 21 minutes in. And at which point, I think it was 5-0, wasn't it? last year at 21 minutes. I was like, it's 0-0, exciting times. And then just essentially 2 kind of mistake-laden goals within 90 seconds or so just destroyed anything they'd been trying to build. It was dreadful. And, to go to a game and have 73% of the possession, yet lose 4-0, kind of just shows just how they were picked off and how I think the biggest disappointment for me was the physicality of just how Newcastle won every second ball, every duel, every little key moment. They were there. Every set piece, they were winning them in the air as well. Look, they've got some big, strong players in, Burn and Shah, players like that who are going to cause a nuisance in that. But also to just lose the ball around the pitch, and the players that kind of have been the more reliable struggled a bit as well. It was just dreadful. I mean, I was about to say at least we didn't get soaked like we did last year, but I did. I came out and on the way back to the train station, the heavens absolutely opened up just to kind of, I got this little kind of mobile umbrella thing. I say mobile, I know all umbrellas are mobile, but it's the size of like a mobile phone. It kind of expands. It was not suited to the rain of Newcastle. Like the wind destroyed it. It's now a very broken umbrella. Very little positives to take from it. Yes, they didn't concede 6, I guess, but they didn't score even a single goal this time. And other than those Timo Werner early chances, didn't really threaten, I didn't feel, as the game wore on. Postecoglou and James Maddison spoke afterwards about the lack of bravery in the passing, and I'd agree with that. I felt they didn't take enough chances. I looked at the passing success stats for a lot of the players. Weirdly, I know this sounds odd, they were too high. They were all up in like late 80s, 90s. And that, to me, especially for attacking players, just screams safe, short passes, not really attempting any through balls. That wasn't good enough. The movement was terrible. There were so many times. Look, the key is, this is something that I still see people say, like, stop passing it out from the back. Hoof it, like, get it up the pitch. And it's like, if we haven't worked out by now, that's just not how they're going to play. I don't think we're ever going to understand it, because they're going to do that. But what actually is the key to making that work. Is not even the bravery of the passing; it's the movement of those around them to be options for the ball, and that was the biggest problem. I was going to call him Pochettino after watching him last night. Postecoglou said, was asked after the game about the pressing of Newcastle, and he said it was good. It wasn't any like worse or like more ferocious than any other team we faced, though. He said we've worked and passed around presses like that before, and it was the lack of bravery in making a run into an area to show yourself for the ball. Too many players shying away, hiding from those passes, maybe because of the noise at St James's Park, the pressure, which is a shame because they did it fine at Villa Park. That was a similar situation. I just found that really disappointing. And actually, for those kind of who want them to hoof it up the pitch, I actually felt that every time Spurs did that, that was when they invited the most pressure on themselves. When Vicario would hoof it up there, or a fullback would knock it down the line to nobody, that was when the ball would just come straight back from Newcastle. I do think I might be in a minority here, and I'll ask you this in a second, but I like the passing out from the back. I know it's scary at times, but I like the way it invites pressure. Invites players forward and then allows a space behind it if you get the passing right. I think it's a good way to play. It probably is a more modern way to play. I mean, what do you think about the passing from the back?
I'm not the biggest fan of it personally. It's all right. It's all right if you've got the players who are good on the ball, but when you don't, it's just a recipe for disaster. I think there's been quite a few examples recently where goalkeepers have been taking maybe a bit too much time and they've conceded goals. And I can remember one a few years ago. I think it was Arsenal against Watford at Vicarage Road. Arsenal decided to pass it out and literally just passed it straight to the Watford player and they scored from it. But I think Spurs in general, they've got players who are good on the ball and they can get away with it. So I don't mind it in that aspect. And we've seen quite a few examples where they've managed to, move it quickly up the pitch, but that just wasn't the case on Saturday. Just really, really wasn't a good performance. And when we're speaking about the chances then, other than those Werner opportunities, I can't really think of anything. I think the only one that stands out for me in the second half was, I think Brennan Johnson, when he was in the central role, ran through. I think he had Werner to his left, Kulusevski to his right, and he went himself and just blazed it high and wide. But other than that,
I think Maddison and Kulusevski had a couple of shots that curled into the keeper's arms. That was about it. That's all I can think of.
But nothing to really test Dubravka at all. Nothing to trouble him. And I think with the Werner chances, looking back at the first one, I don't think there's much he can do with it. I think it's.
Have you got his head to it?
I think it's about a yard behind him.
Just the way I did wonder that after I'd kind of written that the other day.
Yeah, just looking back at the highlights and you see one of the angles from the side, it does look like it's slightly behind him, and that's probably why he's gone for the volley. But I think looking at it first time in the press box, we were saying, surely just go with head. It's at a decent height, but I think it is slightly behind him. But yeah, other than that, just didn't really trouble Newcastle.
No, I mean, his second chance was that the one where he booted at Sonny's feet and knocked him over. I felt so sorry for Sonny that way. He'd played a lovely outside of the football out to Werner, who then cut in and just blasted it back at his own legs and knocked him flying. And then the third one was quite good. No, that was a good chance when Maddison cut in, teed him up, and he
just prodded it wide, really, didn't he? Just
crossed the edge. Yeah, almost hit across the 6-yard box rather than at goal. And this, unfortunately, is probably the downside to Werner is that I guess if there's one thing that's going to cause you pause over the £15 million and potentially high wages, is his finishing good enough to warrant that's the problem. The rest of his game, I think, is good, and I think again he was a threat every time he ran forward. He was probably one of the few kind of players that was. Although I would say I felt sorry. Brennan Johnson in the early part of the game started really well, and he put in that great cross, the one we just spoken about, that went to Werner. But I felt that Spurs didn't use him enough at all. I wonder if that was a byproduct of Pedro Porro carrying an injury, so they weren't switching out to the right as much. But they overloaded on the left too many times, and it just didn't bring any joy to them.
Well, I suppose on the Newcastle side, was it Jacob Murphy at right back, who's not a right back when Brennan Johnson would have been coming up against Dan Burn, who's decent defensively. I wonder if that was maybe part of the thinking.
Maybe, but I'd bet on Johnson against Burn in a foot race.
Yeah.
I think you could have used that a little bit more. Yeah, it was a really disappointing performance. I don't think anywhere quite looked settled. I think the midfield blend didn't quite work. The defence looked shaky. Even Van der Ven looked like he had the wrong studs on. I mean, he was sliding all over. It was like dancing on ice at a couple of in the first 2 goals. Destiny Doggy could have done better for me with the first goal as well. Very easily kind of out-muscled by Anthony Gordon, who's, he's not the biggest, bulkiest, strongest player you'll ever come up against, but he kind of found that far too easy. Pedro Porro's misplay, I think he was trying to get it back to Romero or Vicario. It was just a really kind of awful attempt to prod it back with no knowledge that Anthony Gordon was there. Apparently back home, I think on the TNT Sports coverage, they were still showing the replay of the first goal when they were like, oh no, they've actually looked like going to score another, which must have, I can't even imagine what that was like for people watching at home. They must have been really annoyed at the first goal, and then suddenly they kind of look back up and Newcastle score a second.
But I mean, that was just a blind pass. I don't even think he was looking. And if it's to Romero, I mean, he's totally overhit because Romero's, about 5 yards by him?
Yeah, nowhere
he's just not looking at it. I think he's probably just assumed there's no Newcastle player around. I'll knock it back. For Vicario or Van der Ven will get it. And completely wrong pass. And I agree with you on Destiny for the first goal. Just needs to be so much stronger there. And not much Van der Ven can do, really, is there, when he's slipping?
Yeah, it was a funny one, that. Just every time he was turned inside, he would slide past. And very unfortunate, like the photos for the first goal. It's like, reminds me a bit of you remember Big Davinson Sanchez, it was at Man City, that one where he's like on his head trying to make a tackle. And just the look on Van der Ven's face, the utter kind of, looks like he's just been shot or something, like he's gone down from a sniper or something.
It's like the Phil Jones pictures from years ago, just all different ones. It was
not the greatest look. What did you make of the third goal?
Another poor one to concede. I think Son needs to do better controlling the ball, but then again, he's not this, powerful front man who's good at holding the ball up. He just bounces back way too easily. And good ball from Bruno. I don't think enough's probably made of the movement from Isak. I think it's just really good play from him to bend his run as well, make sure he's onside, and good finish. But as quick as Van der Ven is, Isak's pacey as well. It's just not a good one again to concede from a Spurs perspective. Just a bit all too easy when you look at all of them.
Yeah, actually, fun enough, watching Sunday, very similar to Ollie Watkins' goal at the end in terms of running from his own half with no one really in behind. And that's the thing, it kind of plays into that easy criticism, I suppose, of the Postecoglou high line, that if you're not able to get back, you're going to get stuffed from a ball over the top. And I think it was you said to me, I was like straight away, like, oh, he looked offside. And you kind of pointed out quite quickly, he was in his own half. It's like, you can't even, it's never going to be an offside if you're in your own half. And that, that was really disappointing. For Bruno just to look up and think, oh, hello, if I just knock this over the top, he's through on goal and we're in our own half. That shouldn't happen. I know they're pushing up to try and get a goal back, but still, that was just, it kind of just looked really naive. And then the fourth goal, another set piece. Postecoglou, that's the, I know Postecoglou sometimes says some things that I think he's maybe just trying to be contrary, or he genuinely may believe them, but to kind of continue this narrative that set pieces, he thinks Spurs have done quite well on this season. I can't have that one. I'm afraid that's the 11th set piece they've conceded from. And to be honest, I could have conceded 3 or 4 from set pieces during that game. Newcastle won every single header pretty much from every corner, every free kick. It's definitely an area they need to be stronger on. where do you stand on the whole? Well, quite literally where the players stand, but where do you stand on the whole zonal versus man marking thing?
For me, I think it's just man mark, because then basically it's your man. If he loses you, that's your fault. At the end of the day, zonal is that when basically, well, one player could say, well, he's coming to your area, that's not mine. There could be a bit of confusion over that,
It's all about
maybe.
communication, isn't it?
Yeah. For me, all day long, man marking. Just good header from Fabian Schär. Fair play to him, but he's just free header.
Yeah, and
really.
the irony is actually Kulusevski kind of was doing a bit of man marking on him, but just completely lost him. He just did a little dummy, went one way, and Kulusevski was just, I don't know where he was heading, back to Sweden or something, but he was completely in the wrong direction and left Schär just to jump up above. And like you say, it was a good header. Could Vicario have done better with any of them? Maybe the third. He had a difficult decision to make because he was so far out of goal.
Yeah, maybe. First two, no. I think the first one's a really good finish, just whips it into the bottom corner. He's scored a few of those lately when he's getting into those areas, just quick change of feet and finding the back of the net. Second one, I don't think there's much you can do about that. And then, yeah, maybe the third one. Fourth's a good header. I don't think it's right in the corner, though.
Yeah, I think it was too far for him to come out and claim as a keeper. And then, if you're, that power on the head, I think it was kind of beyond him before he could even really. It's one of those strange games because he didn't really make any saves, yet conceded 4 goals. It's just they were very clinical, Newcastle.
I think the only save I can remember from him was Elliot Anderson in probably midway inside the second half. I think he got it, nice turn of feet, and then he's aimed for the near post, and Vicario's pushed it wide.
Yes.
Other than that, I think looking at the match stats, it was 5 shots on target for Newcastle, scored 4 of them. Emil Kraft hit the post as well. There was a couple of occasions when I think it was Van der Ven and Doggy had made a couple of blocks, first half and second half. So Newcastle were getting into the good positions, but Vicario wasn't really tested, much like Dubravka at the other end of the pitch.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? It's just a tale of a more clinical team and a team that just couldn't really even get into the positions they needed to. I mean, Newcastle only had 185 passes on the day. I think Spurs were up in like the 500s or something. And it just shows you they just made them count. This is kind of what Spurs were doing, I guess, under Conte especially. They were not always had the possession. I did a piece today, and in it I was talking about how Spurs have got the highest average possession in a season, like per game, than they've had for years. Like even more so than peak Pochettino kind of thing. They've got it's something like 62. I can't remember the exact figure. 62% around there. It's second in the league, only behind City, who have got something like 66. And I think last season it was something like 49% was their average possession. And but it just shows you it's like you can dominate a game in possession, but if I'm Eddie Howe and someone says to me, would you rather have 73% possession or would you like the 4-0? I was like, no, you're right. That's fine. So you can keep your possession. It's about making more of it, and that was the most disappointing thing. I didn't feel like this felt so much like the 6-1 from last year. It felt more like a continuation of the Fulham game at Craven Cottage for me. Just one where the other team, every time they broke, looked dangerous, and every time Spurs kind of got up the pitch, didn't really have a solution to unlocking the defence.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think the only aspect of Saturday's defeat that reminded me of the 6-1 was literally Anthony Gordon going up and scoring straight after Isak had scored the opener.
He played well, Anthony Gordon. Yeah, whoever had him should have kept hold of him. What a player.
No, he's playing really, really well. And when he's delivering performances like that, surely he's got to be a shoo-in for the England squad. I think he's really developed as a player under Eddie Howe, and Newcastle fans, because I think I waited behind in the press box a bit longer after you'd gone in, and Newcastle fans were waiting behind to see he was doing post-match interview, and they're
Were
all
you calling
cheering
out his
name.
name? Were you? You were all cheering. You were cheering his name, were you? Then?
I,
Anthony!
I definitely wasn't.
Do you know he
But
had 8 key passes on the day, 2 assists, 1 goal, 8 key passes. He was. We talk about maximum efficiency. His performance was absolutely that.
yeah, he's developing into a really, really good player on the Eddie Howe. So fair play to him. Like you said, I think he should be in the England squad for the Euros. Whether he is or not, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, from a Tottenham's perspective, probably more of the same, like what happened at Fulham. I mean, that was dismal. And this is a problem now. So I can remember doing a piece the other day, it just in terms of the top 4 race, the goal difference is going to be so crucial, worth an extra point, really. And there's been times where Villa have been ahead and Spurs have gone and won at Villa 4-0 and it swung in their direction. It's been a lot of twists and turns, but then when you're losing 4-0 at Newcastle, he just hands it back to Villa.
Absolutely.
Really.
Well, they win 2-0 as well. And you know, I didn't even realise till I saw them say it on Monday Night Football last night that Villa, of course, have got 2 games. As long as the Arsenal game doesn't move, Villa have got 2 games before even Spurs play next. So if they were to win both those home games, I think it's Bournemouth and United. Not United, Bournemouth and Chelsea. I think they've got, haven't they?
It is.
Yeah. They win both those games. There's a 9-point gap by the time the North London derby kicks off, which is, you know, I know Spurs would have 3 games in hand, but that's just such a huge psychological thing, especially with the games Spurs have got left.
Yeah, and I know a lot fans were probably thinking, yeah, we'll go and win at Chelsea. Chelsea have been really poor this season, but 6-0 win yesterday. Don't really need to say much else on that.
Who are they against?
It don't matter. But
I like Jordan Pickford trying to play out from the back, though. That was interesting.
Yeah, shambles. Chelsea have actually done really well at home this season. I think the only decent team they've lost is probably Villa. I think Watkins scored, but they've drawn against Arsenal. They actually should have won that game. Drawn against City. I think drew against Liverpool opening day. Beat
remember.
Manchester United. So as much as the form has been up and down, they're good at home. So there's no guarantees. Anyway, Spurs were going to go to Stamford Bridge and win. And
this is a happy podcast so far, isn't it?
I know.
What an inspiring podcast for anyone out on like a run or something.
But this is the thing. Spurs have gone to Stamford Bridge a number of times in recent years when you're thinking they're going to win, but they never do. So there's no guarantees. And those 3 points advantage that Villa have at the moment, like you said, they can really extend that next couple of games.
Yeah, that man on Monday Night Football last night, Dele Alli, that was the last kind of Chelsea win there. I remember a couple of lovely goals he scored there. Oh, my goodness. You depressed me, and I've got to talk about more stuff. I hadn't even thought about Chelsea yet. Chelsea do look like they're just starting to find some thread of what they want to be now. And I mean, when you got a player like Cole Palmer, he's just ridiculously good player. But yeah, back to the game. I was trying to think of anyone that came out with credit. I can't think of a single one. I don't think anyone came out with any positive aspect to their performance, really. You could maybe argue, maybe Destiny Udogie after that mistake responded quite well. He was probably more proactive from then on. But yeah, there's just something a little bit disjointed about Spurs at the moment. It's not quite working in certain areas. Up front, it's not clicking entirely at the moment. I do have to keep going back to it, but how they didn't sign or why they didn't sign a natural striker in the summer still bewilders me. I get they had Richarlison, but Richarlison missed 11 games last season through injury. He's missed another 7 this one. I mean, he hasn't started a match in 2 months. So I don't think pinning your hopes on a player who, you know, even coming into this season, obviously had issues that needed surgery to fix and things like that. That was a big call. And Sonny, yes, Sonny can play as your focal point in certain games, but to have to play him non-stop regularly in the role, I don't think does him any favours. I think we saw that again on Saturday. He was very un-Son-like. You know, the amount of times that he lost the ball, I mean, all first 3 goals, they kind of eventually culminated from him losing the ball in the Newcastle half. And for a player that saves Spurs so many times, you're limiting what he can do, trying to play him in a back to goal role, which is just not his best kind of way of doing it. And they signed Alejo Velis, was probably the only natural striker they signed this summer, and obviously he's very, very raw. As we're seeing, he can't even get a game for Sevilla right now, or even minutes, or even in the squad yesterday, Sunday. And it's. I mean, what do you think about the striker situation? It's surely something they've got to fix this summer, haven't they?
Oh yeah, it's got to be a priority. I did a piece after the game just saying new striker's a priority, and so is a number 6 as well.
Yeah.
It's going to be another big transfer window for Spurs, and it's just not working for Son through the middle. It's all right, say if you're going to play against a backline like Tottenham's, where they're going to be up high and there's going to be gaps here and there, then Son can exploit them, and it might work in his favour a week on Sunday against Arsenal. But in the previous 3 games against West Ham, Nottingham Forest, and Newcastle, where you've got defenders, powerful defenders who are just going to stay in a solid back 4, then he's not going to get much joy from it. And what we saw on Saturday was he kept dropping deep at times, too far deep, a bit like Kane used to do, to try and get on the ball and make things happen.
And to be fair, Postecoglou was calling him to do that a couple of times as well, purely because there were no midfield options for the defenders to pass to.
Yeah, and midfield certainly didn't help him out. So he had no shots on goal in his 58 minutes or
didn't
whatever.
Didn't even dribble the ball once.
No, just totally ineffective in that role. And for Son, who is your main man, you want him to be at the top of your game. So for me, why don't you just put him on the left, put Werner in the middle? Because surely Son Heung-min at the top of his game on the left flank is better than Timo Werner at the top of his game on the left flank. And Werner's got experience of playing through the middle anyway.
He has. I would say he's probably not going to hold the ball up either. But I absolutely get what you're saying. I would rather, against a low block, have Sonny trying to run in behind down the flank, which is easier than running down, trying to run behind through the middle in a kind of cluttered penalty area. It's difficult. I mean, Richarlison not being fit has stuffed Postecoglou. I do think. I think you get him in the middle just with his hold-up play. Also, I think with set pieces. I think both sides of the pitch. I think you have Richarlison in both boxes, and suddenly they're scoring from more set pieces. Although I think they've got 11 of those as well. And he's also, like Kane used to be, the first kind of line of defence from set pieces and corners and heading it away. And that's something you got to fix this summer. We both watched Isak on Saturday, and you're just thinking him up front for Spurs. He's probably doubling his goal tally this season, because he would have got so many chances. They've got to strengthen there. They've got to spend a bit of money there. They need to. I know you can't naturally replace Kane. That's impossible, because he was like a dual purpose player. But it's got to be done. I don't know who it will be. That would be interesting. Whether they kind of go for a bit of a gem from another league that they feel fits the Postecoglou system. I'm sure there'll be players that, using the data they'll find, can do a bit of everything for him and then be in the box to put the ball away. I mean, or it could be someone more obvious. Ivan Toney this summer is going to have a fair few suitors, but we're looking probably 40-50 million pound mark. That's Spurs kind of range where they normally sign players. He is a renowned now Premier League goal scorer. I think in this system he would be fantastic. It's a funny one. There's seems to be some of the big boys seem to be stepping away from him slightly and maybe not seeing him as a target, which might put Spurs in a better position. It's just whether, I suppose, Postecoglou, I think he's base as well. I think he's represented by them. So that's another kind of big link to Spurs. And, Spurs having an England international striker up front isn't the worst look either. But we'll see. I think he'll have his pick of his clubs. But if I'm Tottenham, maybe do some kind of deal with Reguilon going the other way, because Reguilon's done very well at Brentford, and Thomas Frank seems to love him if he wanted to remain there. But I'm not saying pin all your hopes on Ivan Toney, because I think there's a lot of strikers out there they'll be looking at. There's Jimenez in the Eredivisie.
Feyenoord,
Yeah, he's ripping it up there. I know Eredivisie isn't the greatest example when Big Vincent Janssen they did that before, but I guess it's just in terms of the physique and attributes of the player. But there'll be
I'll tell you who'd be good. Gyökeres for Sporting CP, Victor Gyökeres.
He's going to be a popular guy, I think, as well this summer, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's going to cost a lot. I think he's got 100 million euros release clause in his contract. I cannot believe no Premier League club moved for him last summer, because he was so good in the Championship with Coventry. Good goal scorer, big, powerful, holds the ball up well. I think he's got all the qualities and attributes that would suit Tottenham, but I think it'd cost a lot of money. And say if you wanted Alexander Isak as well, Newcastle paid 63 million for him 2 years ago from Sociedad. He's got all the attributes to be a good player in Postecoglou's system, good age as well. But how much Newcastle going to want for him? Pushing 100 million maybe?
They've got to probably sell someone this summer, haven't they? Looking at financial fair play stuff. But I'd be stunned if it's him. It's probably going to be someone like Bruno, isn't it? You'd think, someone like that.
Yes. I mean, for Isak, if they paid 63 million, they want a big profit on top of that as well. So
I reckon up to 100,
yeah.
I mean, Ollie Watkins would be incredible, but let's be honest, if you're Ollie Watkins, you're just doing what you do and you stick to it, because he's just been phenomenal.
Yeah, 100%. And Villa, good chance they might be in the Champions League as well. So why would you want to leave? I'm sure there's a striker out there for Tottenham somewhere, and fingers crossed it will get solved in the summer. Right, we're halfway through the pod now. Unfortunately, I don't have a good segue as the previous episode, probably the greatest one ever, to introduce the benefits of using NordVPN. But Ali, I'm sure you can take us away anyway.
I mean, there's no other clubs that you could find that are sponsored by NordVPN. Honestly, that was we even got a tweet, didn't we? Someone saying it was like the best ever advert segue that they've ever had in a podcast. Yeah, I was very impressed. It's quite funny. Even on the trip back from Newcastle, while I was trying to write everything up, there were a funny bunch of Spurs fans on there that were how do I put this? They were enjoying their day regardless of the result, is probably the best way to put it. And they were having a bit of a laugh and stuff, and they kind of realized who I was, and I got a few shouts of "Golden, yes!" They were doing that stuff like that, talking about the podcast. I'm pretty sure someone shouted NordVPN as well. It was it was a very it did lighten the mood on the trip back. But no, I love that. It's kind of this weird thing where NordVPN has kind of just been associated with us now as a podcast, which I guess is the whole point of the deal, and the partnership that we have with them. And obviously, it's worked out very well for us, and hopefully, it's worked out for them, and it's worked out for the people that use it as well. Because I will, always say that is the fastest VPN in the world, NordVPN, and it means there's no buffering, there's no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. It's so many times while doing it for work, while doing it for kind of holidays, I've been able to use NordVPN to switch my devices to thinking they're in a different country, whether that's back home or in another one. You can use it for booking flights from other countries if you want to do that. Let's say travel to Italy, it might be cheaper to buy the flights themselves from Italy, and you can set your device using NordVPN to thinking it is in Italy, so you can get those prices. And streaming services, sometimes you can buy them from other countries if you want to watch certain sports and movies or whatever that you wouldn't normally be able to get over here. Security wise, it's good. It blocks out a lot of unwanted things and unwanted people that might try and grab at your stuff using public Wi-Fi and things like that. So it means that you're paying out for Nord, but you're saving money overall. There's a whole host of other benefits from signing up to NordVPN, so why not give it a go? To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and you're helping support our podcast every time you click on that link. And if you weren't able to hear that link, it's in the episode description box.
Right, let's talk about the midfield then, because we were discussing that in the podcast ahead of the game at St James's Park. in the end, Ange Postecoglou opted for a midfield three of Yves Bissouma, Rodrigo Benteke, and James Maddison. Again, just didn't happen for Spurs in midfield. It's really weird because, at the start of the season, or the opening months of the season, you'd have probably said Spurs' midfield is their biggest strength, and you could probably argue right now it's maybe the weakness in the team. Is things just aren't clicking for me. I'd have gone with Pierre-Emile Højbjerg instead of Yves Bissouma. I thought Bissouma's probably just giving his forwards the time to, drop him, give him a rest on the bench, and hopefully that'll, act as a bit of a springboard for him to get back to his best. But he was hooked early in the second half. I think it was a bit of a surprise Højbjerg didn't come on at halftime, because I think you said he wasn't warming up, was he?
No.
I think he was basically in the changing room with the players. And then what I noticed just after halftime, where I think there was about 3 or 4 Spurs players warming up with the tracksuit tops on. Højbjerg just had his Spurs top on with bib underneath, and I mean, it wasn't too long until he came into the game, but by then, too little, too late.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that Postecoglou just sees him as another Eric Dyer. He sees him as a player who is part of the past and not really part of the future. 1 year left in his contract, doesn't particularly fit his style like a glove. And I think the problem with that is that, unlike Eric Dyer, Højbjerg has been able to contribute a lot this season, despite the fact he's only started 6 Premier League games. He's brought quite a fair bit to the team every time he's come into it. I do agree that I don't feel quite as comfortable with him receiving the ball on the edge of the Spurs box facing the Spurs goal as I would be with Bissouma, 100%. There's a little bit more of a margin for error, I think, with him that comes in. But I do think he also gives you a certain degree of discipline and stability in the midfield. And he's also got an engine on him. And I would say where he kind of is better than Bissouma is that he's got more going forward. He's got a better passing range. He can get it to the edge of the box as well and create problems too. So, yeah, I do feel for him. I think we are kind of seeing now his last probably month or so at the club, and I think he will head off then to whoever wants him, and I think should have a few suitors. I think this season's probably not helped Spurs in terms of, I don't think his price will have gone up because people will just look at how little he's played and how clearly he isn't part of the future. But I do think that in terms of interest, I think that will increase because a lot of teams will be able to see how he can come in and do a lot for them. So, yeah, I did feel sorry for him. Bissouma, like I said, I still think he's the best option for the number 6, even without looking at the form. I know you kind of do have to. And like this, I mean, we'll talk about this in next week's pod ahead of the Arsenal game, but even for the Arsenal game, I would probably still play Bissouma. And I know there's loads of people right now going, no, get him out of the team because he's rubbish at the moment. But I still think in terms of what you're going to want to do and get the ball and move it quickly from the edge of the Spurs box, I still think he's the best man for that. And I think against Arsenal earlier in the season, he was terrific, especially second half. He dominated them. It's just marrying it all up with his confidence. I was watching there is a, they sometimes do that drive back from the training ground videos on Spurs. The latest one, it was Ben Haynes does it. He drove Bissouma back home, and just listening to him and how much he clearly wants it to work at Spurs. He's got a bit of a kind of a love for the club. He loves Postecoglou, and he admitted himself that's one of his strengths, is receiving that exact role, receiving the ball on the edge of the box. He's got no fear. He doesn't care if someone's closing him down. He's kind of got already in his head mapped up. And he said himself, which I thought was quite interesting, he said, sometimes I don't even touch the ball. Sometimes I'll just let the ball run through because I know they're going to try and get me, not the ball. And it was all really interesting. And you just kind of think there's a player in there that Postecoglou will always turn to, but yet that hasn't translated into confidence in his play now. It was at the start of the season. He was remarkable. Whether that is a a desire thing on Basuma's part. Whether he shows the same intensity in training, I don't know. I don't know, but it definitely, we know they're looking for another number 6 to challenge him for next season. And yeah, if he can marry the skills that he's got, the ability to play within the system, to just a bit more drive and a bit more kind of, I think tactical nous as well is another thing perhaps he hasn't quite got that maybe Højbjerg has. But yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, what did you make of Bentancur on Saturday?
They did
Yeah, that's the
okay.
same noise as me.
Yeah, they did okay in parts. Still not the Bentancur we know from
No, not
last
yet.
season prior to the injury, and that will come next season with the more minutes that come his way. But you've got a player of such quality there. You just want more and more from him. Same with Maddison. For me, he should be so much more influencing things, and he's just not.
He's not playing as many through balls, is he, as he used to? It doesn't feel like.
No, I don't know what it is with Maddison and Bissouma. Maddison's form's just drops off a cliff since the injury, and the same with Bissouma in terms of those suspensions and his AFCON participation. But I mean, with Bissouma, you could probably say his form was starting to dip even before those suspensions. When he started, I think it was Wolves, wasn't it? Really, in terms of the 5 yellow cards, one they weren't good at Molineux. Yeah, he's just trying to get this combination right, and I can imagine Pat Matasar will come back in against Arsenal, maybe for Bentancur. Generally, I couldn't tell you the answer in terms of the best midfield combination. How you get them back to playing as they were at the start of the season, it's a bit of a mystery, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's I think is Postecoglou's biggest question right now, is that midfield. Because they're not protecting the back line, they're not helping the attack create either. I think Pat Matasar does probably come back in. I think after that period of fasting that he'd had as well for Ramadan, I think you'll see a stronger kind of Pat Matasar now as well. Bentancur, I'd agree. I think it was just okay. There was one moment when he kind of ran through the middle and got whacked in the head. And I was like, oh, that's the bit of the Bentancur of old. That's the kind of the make and the break that I think Postecoglou wants him to make, but it wasn't enough of that. With him, he's definitely got a massive excuse. We can give, he didn't play for almost a year, so that's fine. He will get back to those levels. But I just get this feeling that the midfield of next season for Spurs is going to look very different. I think you'll see more number 8s come in as well. I mean, Lucas Bergvall will be one of them. Be interesting to see how quickly he develops, and whether we see a player like a Valise who comes in and Postecoglou kind of likes to look at him, or Alfie Devine, and thinks, okay, for the long term, there's a real player there, or whether it's a bit like when Dele first came, referring to him again after last night, but when he first came in from MK Dons, and Pochettino looked at him and was like, he's ready for now. And I wonder whether Lucas Bergvall, I think it'll take a little bit of adapting, but whether he ends up being a player he thinks, well, why not use him as one of the number 8s now? Kind of why not, if not starting at first, but someone that impacts games later on. But yeah, I do think that 3 is going to look very, very different next season. I think they need someone that challenges Maddison as well. I think Maddison maybe is the one player who, whenever we're doing our predicted teams, he's just in there. He's in there as a natural kind of choice each time, and maybe that shouldn't be the case. And I'm not saying, that's not a kind of derogatory thing, because I do think over the course of the season, around the injuries, the ankle injury, he's done really well on the whole. But yeah, I think there's games where he needs to kind of feel under pressure to perform that little bit higher. And he was very honest after the game, and he included himself in the lack of bravery in the passing as well. He had Spurs' most key passes. He had 4 key passes, but like I said, Anthony Gordon had 8, and so Maddison can be influenced in that game even more. We haven't even spoken about Oliver Skipp, just like the forgotten man. He's just like, it just feels like Postecoglou has clearly looked at him and just decided he's not a fit for the number 6 role. Which is, I mean, I'm not one to criticise because I'm not there watching in training sessions what he's doing, but I can only go back to watching him in the academy, and technique-wise and passing-wise, he was one of the best young midfielders there in terms of defensively able to play out from the back. So it seems a real shame that he's clearly isn't able to do that. And I mean, we don't know what the future holds for Oliver Skipp. I think the whole club train thing is going to stuff him a bit in terms of getting away and getting some regular football this summer. But we'll see. I did ask Ange about that before the match, and he was didn't even say the words Oliver or Skipp. He didn't even mention his name. He was a very generic answer about they'll make decisions that are best for the club and for the player. It very much sounded like, yeah, we're going to have to keep him because we've got no other, I guess, unless you promote very young players who you shouldn't need to because they'd be on the under-21s list, like an Alfie Devine or someone like that. But yeah, the midfield is an issue. And it is one that needs to be fixed. Again, we'll talk about this more in the next pod, but I'm interested to see what three he goes for, because the three that played so well at the Emirates overall was the three that, started the game against Nottingham Forest the other week, and two of them ended up got taken off at half time. Obviously, different teams, different threats, different weaknesses. So no two games are really the same. I appreciate that, but maybe you could argue that looking back at the previous fixture is quite a good way of seeing a midfield that worked. And actually against Newcastle, I did wonder at the last moment whether he might have gone for Sarr because of that. Because I think Newcastle at home was Basuma, Sarr and Kulusevski in the midfield. But he didn't, and it didn't quite work. So, yeah, a big area that needs improving over the summer as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd like to see a bit of a change in there with Maddison because his form's not been great, but I can't see Ange dropping. Yeah, I'd like to see Gio have a go from the first minute in that role because Maddison's not been pulling up any trees recently.
Do you think he's put Lo Celso in the Højbjerg position of year left on his contract, maybe thinks he's not going to be there?
But then again, if you're planning for the future and you don't think they're going to be there, then why have him in the squad?
Well, this is it. He kind of convinced him to stay last summer, didn't he?
Yeah,
he's like,
yeah.
He's in the three in the Argentinian midfield a lot. It just feels like a wasted kind of opportunity with Lo Celso.
It is. At the end of the day, you go into games to win them, to try and get into the top four. Surely you name your best team. Or, in Lo Celso's case, he should be on in matches a lot earlier. I mean, Saturday, game had gone after 5 minutes of the second half when they were 3-0.
Yeah.
He could have come on a lot earlier and been given the go. But again, it's just 5-10 minutes here and there. The other option, I know Dane Kulusevski hasn't been great recently, but you put him into his preferred role as a number 10. There's options there. It doesn't always have to be Maddison, but I just can't see Ange dropping Maddison, especially when it's the Arsenal game coming up. Maybe if it was against, say, Burnley or Sheffield United, maybe there could be a change there, but I just can't see it for the Arsenal one.
Yeah, it is a difficult one because, I mean, you looked at, even the other day, Maddison was probably the most likely to make something happen. He set up Werner for that chance. He had a shot himself. He's just not quite where he needs to be right now, and that's all it is. But then, again, does he probably deserve a little bit of leeway because he was out for like almost 3 months with an ankle problem? Maybe I think he said himself in an interview, was it last week or the week before, that he's still kind of not quite where he's getting there. He feels he's approaching where he was beforehand, but he admits he's not quite there yet. But yeah, just competition. It kind of feels like he's got a bit of competition there in Lo Celso, and Postecoglou just doesn't seem to want to use him.
Yeah. In terms of Postecoglou, then came in for a bit of criticism on Saturday, and you were in his post-match press conference, and he was talking about painful growth.
Yes,
Tottenham fans
it wasn't a medical question.
Tottenham fans obviously don't want to see the team losing heavily week in, week out, but I think there are going to be instances where this is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult because I can understand 100% how low fans feel after a game like that. It's dreadful, and if you're going to combine it as well with the Fulham game a couple of weeks before. You know, that's 3 kind of away performances in a row, if you're going to include West Ham, where they haven't really reached the levels they should. And obviously then everything suddenly becomes the end of the world, and everything's like Postecoglou's like the old, he's got no plan B and all that, and he only plays in a certain way. And it's interesting, that, isn't it? When you look at a lot of these top teams, they do all kind of play in the one way. It's like, it's quite a weird thing. It's like, I think it is just a go-to comment, like there's no plan B or he won't change the system. But then you look at a lot of these big teams, and they do have a very set style of play that, yeah, you tweak stuff within it, which I do think Postecoglou does. I think he's always says it himself, that almost changing the players naturally tweaks how the team's going to play in certain scenarios and stuff. But yeah, I do. It's an interesting one. I wonder, I was trying to think now whether the teams that have kind of dominated in recent years, you know, specifically Man City and Liverpool, have always played in a very kind of set way. They haven't really changed it up too much. And it's maybe the ones like Unai Emery is getting a lot of praise this season, and rightly so. Villa have done very well. However, maybe some of the question marks about him that have been out there over the years have been that actually he maybe tactically worries too much about the opposition, and constantly week in, week out, they're changing their style. So maybe it's a club that, he's a manager that maybe will win you cups and things like that, because in rounds he can change this and get through rounds of a competition. But over the course of a 38-game season, maybe it's not as set a style to win a league, which is a really interesting kind of side of looking at it as well. I hadn't really looked at that with him. And yes, I kind of feel the Postecoglou stuff at the moment, they haven't quite found their way at the moment. We're getting all of the pain stuff that we spoke about right back at the start of the season that comes at every club. We're getting it now. You know, it's a bit like when we say about transfer windows, when they like sign players too early, and not too early, but they sign them early, and at the end of the window, we kind of say, like, can you imagine if they sign those players at the end of the window? Everyone would be really happy. And I do wonder whether this season, had it started with this bumpy bit, and the last 10 games they played, like, let's say the first 10 games of this season, everyone will be like, oh, yeah, I can see where this is going. It's like a really weird way round it seems to have happened this time. And it might be where I might even ask, you know, in like 2 years' time when we finally get our next press conference with him, because of the breaking games that we keep having, it might be worth asking him, is this like a different way round to how it works for him normally at seasons at clubs? Look, as well, it hasn't been as awful as I think we'd like to maybe think it has been when a result like that comes along. They've won 10 of the last 17 Premier League matches. They've only lost 4 games in that run. I'm going back to the Chelsea defeat, because the Chelsea defeat was kind of the one where you felt the shift a bit, didn't you? They went from a certain gear into, obviously had a lot of injuries and suspensions as well. But yeah, to win 10 of those 17 games and only lose 4. And I think the Newcastle and Fulham games, not scoring any, conceding 7 goals, I think that leaves an impression as well. But yeah, his painful growth comment, I'll just give you the line. He said, there's no point sitting around feeling sorry for yourself. There's another game in 2 weeks. We've just got to get ready for that. It's not the first time it's happened to us, and it won't be the last. It's part of our growth. Sometimes that growth is painful. That's part of it, and you've just got to embrace it, use it, and get ready for the next challenge. And I saw a fair few people when I put that quote out underneath saying, what growth? There's been no growth. There has. I'm sorry, but there has been growth. I mean, at this point in the season, they've got more points than they have in the past 5 years. The past half a decade, they've got more points. They've got 60 points, and they've still got 6 games to play. And as we said previously, because it hasn't changed because they lost, it's the same amount of points they ended up with at the end of last season in total. Look, who knows? The way the end of this season goes with such tough games, they might not get another point. But at this point in time, you know, it's 7 more than where they were at last season. That's progress. That is progress. To have 7 more points than you did last season is progress. They've scored 6 more goals than they did at this point last season. That's progress. They've actually conceded 2 fewer than last season as well. Despite our kind of reservations over some aspects of defending, that is also progress. And also, scoring 6 more goals is without a certain all-time top goal scorer there as well. That's another aspect of it too. You know, and you kind of remember back to Conte's when he came in and thinking, oh, what a positive season that was. They finished 4th and everything. But they're actually 3 points ahead where they were that season. I mean, in the interest of balance, obviously there was a Nuno spell in there that you've got to take into account as well. Although I think Conte and Postecoglou's win percentage is quite similar. They'd scored 9 more goals than they had at that point in that season. The key, though, is probably they conceded 11 more than they did in that season. And I think most of that is probably the 7 goals in those Newcastle and Fulham games. So, yeah, there has been progress made. There has. I do think Postecoglou is evolving, or is going to have to evolve as well. I'm absolutely not saying that none of this is his fault. He is a man that is in his first experience of the highest level in a Premier League, at the top table, as it were. And I think he's finding that certain aspects of his game that do need to evolve with it, and he will. He said that every club he goes to, he always evolves the system. It's not the same system he had, when he was back at Brisbane Raw. It's not exactly the same system at all. It does evolve, and there are aspects to it that I think he will tweak. And I do think a big chunk of it is having the right players for the system as well, and having a couple of transfer windows to do that. And I think this summer will be the big one for that. But yeah, I think it's one of those where we've said it before. This was always going to be a rebuilding season. The club are behind him massively. They believe in. They're really pleased with what he's done behind the scenes as well, in the overhaul that's gone in there. And I think it was in Daniel Levy's statement after with the financial results. He said in that this was a season of rebuilding, and that's kind of we accept that. I think there's still doubts that he's going to have to overcome, and that's a natural part of coming into this league for the first time. Does his football work for an extended period of time? Does it evolve, like I say? Can he get the club to buy him the right players for the system? Can he kind of adapt as managers, very high-level managers, start to realise what his system is and try to counter it? That's going to be a key thing for him as well. But look, it's very early days to kind of make judgments on stuff like that, because this is his kind of first real hurdle in the season that hasn't been a massive injuries or suspensions. And look, he succeeded everywhere else he's gone. I'd be surprised if he doesn't at Spurs, but I guess that's football for you. We'll find out.
Yeah, I can understand if people have their concerns, say if it was a further 12 months down the line and they're losing heavily in some games. But yeah, it's just this season is a bit of a rebuild. He needs to try and bring his own players in, what he wants to mold the team in his way. Some of the manner of the defeats recently hasn't been great, namely the Fulham and Newcastle games. And I don't think they've been as good playing that free-flowing football as they were in the opening months of the season when they were blowing teams away. But as you said, they've still won, 10 of 17 Premier League games, which is good, even though they might not have been playing at the best. So I think there's certainly much more to come from them. And I think the players will be learning all the time under him, and from the experiences so far in the matches. Going to be a really tough end to the season. Big games. But they've coped well on the whole against Liverpool, Arsenal and Man City when they played them already this season. And
is it because their football suits them slightly more, maybe?
Probably. Always going to be hard to play against teams again who are going to sit back, makes it a bit more difficult. When there's a bit more space, it's going to work in the favour. So, yeah, I think I'm confident that Spurs can, get back on track on the Ange. It's the football, Tottenham fans were crying out for a year ago, really. So
it's way better football than last season.
Yeah.
If you take those heavy defeats, take Fulham, Newcastle, and probably the Wolves games out of it, the football overall this season, I mean, God, how many podcasts did we do last season where we were just like, oh, it's so boring.
Every week.
Yeah, it's nowhere near that. I think sometimes emotion clouds that a little bit, and it has. It's been a far more enjoyable season overall, far more. And we've still got to see where it ends up.
Yeah. Right, before we head off, you just want to talk about Troy Parrott and a rather bizarre red card this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we'll do a kind of a proper loan roundup on the next one. But just among the many things that happened this week in a loan roundup, this one absolutely stood out to me. Troy Parrott. He has had I think it's a quad injury he's had that's kept him out the last 5 games for Excelsior Rotterdam. And if you're not aware what Troy's been doing in the Eredivisie, he's been doing really well. He's had a terrific loan there, getting goals and assists and really kind of stepping up his career. So he came back. They were playing Volendam, Excelsior, and he was brilliant. He is a terrific return. He scored a goal, really lovely finish, ball over the top, it ran onto it, knocked it through. He got an assist with a really lovely flicked on header from a corner to the back post where it was nodded in. Could have scored a hat-trick on a day, could have got a hat-trick of assists as well. He was just all over them. They won 4-0. Came off in the 68th minute, and you're thinking, what a brilliant return. Story ends. No, the story does not end there, because Troy, and I bet he feels so daft right now. There was a little kind of scuffle on the pitch at the final whistle, and the referee kind of went away and he was told to look at his VAR screen, like his pitch side monitor. And you're thinking, like, oh, that's weird. What's happened there? And you suddenly see the images of what the referee sees. And after the scuffle, as one of the Volendam players is being kind of taken away, Troy comes out of nowhere, all like jacketed up because he's been on the bench for 20 minutes or so, goes over to the Volendam player, and for an unknown reason, it depends what you think it exactly is, he either flicks the guy's ear or pulls it. It is a really weird moment. The referee sees it, comes over, shows Troy Parrott a red card, even though he wasn't on the pitch anymore. The other guy got a second yellow because of his part in the little scuffle beforehand. I think there was another Excelsior player that was yellow carded as well. And so Troy, for pulling someone's ear when there was no need for him to go over and be involved, it wasn't even near the other Excelsior players. It was like he made a point of doing it. Potentially now could be out for 3 games with violent conduct suspension. And it's so silly. And it's a nightmare. Excelsior, really showed they've struggled without him, and he's come back in and they've won 4-0. And he goes and does something really daft like that. And it's a shame. It is a shame because, like I say, I'm sure he feels utterly daft right now. To get yourself a red card for pulling someone's ear, or flicking it, or whatever it was he exactly did to it. But yeah, just a crazy little moment that stood out to me. And I think there'll be a fair line of clubs looking at Troy this summer. I think there's interest in Serie A and the Championship. I think Bundesliga has been some interest as well. He's got another year left, and I think Spurs have got an option to extend him by another year. I'd love, ear pulling aside, Postecoglou to have a little look at him this summer, just to see how he's evolved and adapted. And just have a little look. And if he still doesn't feel that he's right, fair enough. But when you're looking for club trained players, to have another striker there, him and Dane Scarlett, obviously, I think Alejo Velis will probably have to head off again on loan. But to have those two there, Republic of Ireland international Troy, he's got a lot of senior experience now. But I'm not saying as the number 9 as the person, but as there's a little backup and stuff, we'll see. But he's got to stop pulling people by the ear. That'd be a good start.
Right, we'll leave that there for today's latest episode of Golden Guest Tottenham. We'll be back probably next week to look ahead to the North London derby against Arsenal. In the meantime, just keep with us at football.london for all your latest Tottenham news. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and you'll help support our podcast. The link is in the episode description box.